it's not fair. It's not fair. At some point in our lives, I think we've all had the feeling that life was not fair. And we might even cry out, it's not fair. And when the stakes are high and the level of unfairness is bigger than we can wrap our hearts around, we may even feel that God is unfair. And that the compassion and mercy, the pity that we so desperately long for is out of reach, beyond us. And we're left feeling helpless and maybe hopeless too. Sometimes we wish that life and history would be predictable and controllable. And today's account in Genesis reflects the very same human desire. Today we're introduced to Jacob, the grandson of Abraham, the son of Isaac. His parents named him heel grabber, or cheater, as it's also translated, and that might begin to give you a clue about this guy. After some significant wrestling, which we're going to explore in the weeks to come, God will eventually name him Israel. And 12 of his sons will become the 12 tribes of Israel. So Jacob is kind of a big deal, and his story will occupy the rest of the book of Genesis. But today, we read that before he is even born, this grabby, wily Jacob is chosen by God. He's destined for a promise. Divine love and belonging are literally embedded in his DNA, and yet he will spend the rest of his life wrestling with this gift, this grace. Dare I say that there's maybe a little bit of Jacob in us all. And maybe that's why this story seems like a bit much, because it's messy and revealing. Within this crazy Genesis family drama, there's an invitation to both surrender to the hard truth that we are not in control, and to trust in the equally powerful reality of the mercy, grace, patience, and love that surrounds us all. So let's take a look, and if you're taking notes, 3 points. Perfection is not the point or the goal. Blessing and conflict often go hand in hand. God's mercy and compassion enfolds all of us and all of it throughout all of life. So the story begins with a barren, empty womb, infertility. And we saw this with Abraham and Sarah before them. And Isaac and Rebekah were told at the beginning, we hear this lineage, and we're told they come from good families. They've lived good lives. These are good people. They've done everything right. And even so, they must rely on and trust in something that is bigger than their rightness in order for life to continue the way that they hope it will. And immediately we see the invitation to surrender to the reality that we can make choices and we can contribute to our life and the lives of those around us, but we cannot control the whole story. And I don't know about you, but I kind of hate that. I would rather that it would just be true that if I did life right and perfectly, I will avoid disappointment, pain, and suffering. I want it to be true that if I just live life according to the rules, things will work out the way that I want them to. But apparently, perfection is not the point. And striving for perfection won't necessarily ensure the blessings that we're after. You see, we don't earn God's favor or love or belonging by doing everything right. And in fact, more often than not, we come to understand and experience ourselves and God through our mistakes, our mishaps, our deep disappointments, our imperfections. But when things don't go the way we want, what do we usually do? We usually try to convince ourselves it's because we just weren't perfect enough. We didn't try hard enough. We could have been better. We could have done better. We could have earned more love if we just tried harder. And that, my friends, is exhaustingly untrue. As so many wise teachers and creatives have said, perfect is the enemy of good. And that goes for the possible good that we would do and the good that we see in others and ourselves. Perfection just contributes to judgmentalism and intolerance, and it generally makes receiving love largely impossible. So where did we ever get that idea that God demanded perfection from us? And even more, that we would be unworthy of love if we didn't perfect every aspect of our lives. Because as I read this story, this is a story of a God who loves broken people and will never disown us or leave us, even when we make a total mess of our lives, even when we can't imagine how anything good can come of it. We're only 25 short chapters through the beginning of this book, and already it seems pretty obvious. And then we come to this story, and I'm sorry, but this family is just hugely dysfunctional. You don't have to study family emotional process to see that. The children are fighting in utero. The parents are playing favorites and helping cheating and stealing to take place. It's mean, it's conniving, it's filled with fear and scarcity and lies and deceit. And if you ever worried that your family needed to be perfect in order to fit into God's plans and purposes, well, I hope this story disavows you of that. But this crazy family is God's family. And it's pretty clear that God is doing some beautiful and powerful things in and through the strangest and most awkward people. Not despite their dysfunction, but it seems in and through and because of it. Perfect is not the point. Surrender is. Which leads to the second thing that I think this story reveals. Conflict and blessing go hand in hand. And often they show up in the same place, at the same time, in the same situation. God tells Rebekah that the turmoil she feels within her is a sign of what's to come. The roles will be reversed. The firstborn will in fact function as the younger. This birth was an unexpected and welcomed gift. They had prayed for years for this. And it was a tremendous blessing and also a conflict all at the same time. Nothing we read here is what we would expect. The last will be first, and the parents taking sides and playing favorites. The one who is chosen seems dishonest. Everything else is turned upside down, and yet it's still a blessing. Now, I would love, personally, to avoid the conflict and just kind of skip to the good part, but Jacob's drama reveals that if we spend our lives trying to outrun struggle and avoid discomfort at every corner, we may miss out on the blessings that come out of that struggle and are a part of it. Jacob was born grabbing and striving. But he also has this kind of restless, tenacious faith in his destiny. Jacob believes in a future to which his brother Esau is indifferent. And Esau just wants to meet his immediate needs. He's hungry. He's going to die of hunger. That's all he cares about. But Jacob seems to be able to see a long game. He's conniving, but he's also patient. And caught up in his struggle, we're invited to embrace the unpredictability of God's promises in light of our human expectations. Which leads us back to the question we began with. The one we often ask, I think, and the one that Paul is entertaining in his letter to the Romans. Is God unfair somehow? Well, Paul's response is by no means. No, he says, not at all. And I would agree. Because God's mercy and compassion, sometimes translated pity, as we heard, is folded into the entire story. And that's the third point. Because as we noticed in the beginning, the story makes very specific reference to Rebekah's womb and the conflicted blessing that will come from it. But did you know that in Hebrew and in Arabic and in Thai also, the word for womb is the same word as mercy and compassion. And this word invites us to imagine a larger love that is all-encompassing as a mother's deep connection with the life within her, enfolding, protecting, nourishing our lives. Compassion and mercy surrounds this conflicted blessing from the beginning. And guess what is also true about the grace and protection of the womb, where each one of us got our start? You didn't earn it. You didn't have to strive for it. You didn't work for it. You didn't even really deserve it. It was just there to protect and nourish and sustain you. What Paul proclaims to the Romans, what Jacob is striving to grasp, is the foundation of our faith today. God's compassion and mercy are not earned any more than an infant must earn the all-encompassing, life-giving protection of the womb. It's a grace. It's a gift. And it's mysteriously hard to wrap our minds around. And so like Jacob, we might spend the good portion of our lives wrestling it, trying to deserve it, grabbing it a little bit, maybe surrendering into it on a good day, and then turning around and grabbing some more. This piece of Jacob's story is hard, but it is not finished. And neither is ours. Isn't it true that often you have to go through something hard and then you look back at it, and sometimes it's years later you look back and only then do you realize the gift and the grace and the blessings that were right there in the middle of that yuck? So as we sit with this unfinished story, I'd like to end with something that one of you shared with me years ago when I was going through a terribly difficult and painful season in my own life. It arrived like a surprise, a blessing, in my inbox. And I printed it out and I've read it 1,000 times since, and it blesses me every time. It reads, "We are clearly not in control. This is not a negative discovery, but a thrilling discovery of divine providence, being led, used, and guided, having an inner purpose and a sense of personal vocation, and owning one's destiny as a gift from God. Learning that you are not in control situates you correctly in the universe. You know that you are being guided, and your reliance on that guidance is precisely what allows your journey to happen. What a freedom and peace this can bring. Because surrendering to this divine flow is not about giving up or giving in or capitulating or becoming a puppet or being naive or irresponsible or stopping all your planning and thinking. No. Surrender is about a peaceful inner opening that keeps the conduit of living water flowing. It's a quiet willingness to trust that you really are a beloved son or daughter of God, which allows God to be your father or mother. And I would add today, it allows God to be the merciful and compassionate womb that enfolds us all. Thanks be to God. Amen.